Hello, and welcome to the National Museum of the Pacific Wars Author Talk Series. Thank you again for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Jacqueline Mertz, and I am the Museum Programs Coordinator. Today, we have author Bob Richard, who will be sharing the story of Fleet Admiral Nimitz' visit to Wyoming and Yellowstone Park. Bob boasts an array of life experiences. He has been a rancher and businessman, law enforcement park ranger, naval aviator, nonprofit executive, father of four, and author of several books. Today, Bob remains an active outdoor and wildlife photographer, fishing and hiking guide, and is a historian authority for Yellowstone National Park. Bob, thank you for being here with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jacqueline. This is quite a treat. I need to get the photographs up that we can share with our guests. And what a treat it is to be a part of your show and sharing one of the most famous, but one of the best men I've ever met as a young man, and that's Admiral Nimitz. And you can see the book there by your right arm, and we're going to go through parts of that book today. This is the front of my book, Fleet Admiral Nimitz and Naval War Heroes. This was done, the book we published this past year, and I'm going to take you through parts of it, share some of my memories, and share with you as a 9-year-old boy as I met these men and was a part of their trip to Wyoming and to our way of life. And this is the start of the book. The photographs that we're going to be looking at, many of them were taken by my father, Jack Richard, who was a professional photographer, but at the time was the aide to Senator E.V. Robertson, who was our U.S. Senator from Wyoming at the time. And I'll explain more about that as we go along. Moving from the first page of my book to the visit of Admiral Nimitz and his staff. They flew out in one of their aircraft and they spent 4 days with us. The first day they landed in Cheyenne, which is our state capital, and they spent the afternoon at the Wyoming Frontier Days, a big rodeo, one of the biggest in the country, and they were treated as VIPs. And we'll come back to that in a minute. The next morning, they left early and they flew up over the Grand Tetons in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and then flew on into West Yellowstone. And at West Yellowstone, where they landed, they were picked up by people from Cody in a Yellowstone Park bus and transported to Old Faithful. And they spent the night at Old Faithful watching the geysers, having dinner. And then next morning they were up very early breakfast, and traveled to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, and then down to Yellowstone Lake, to the boat docks, and went out on the lake in 2 boats to fish, have lunch, come back to shore, and then travel to Cody, where they arrived late in the afternoon with a stop at our ranch en route. And then they spent 2 more days in Cody, and then they went back home. And I'm going to try and cover that with Dad's photographs that we found stashed away and we put into this book. This is a painting done by Ed Grigware in 1945 when he was part of Admiral Nimitz's staff in Hawaii. And he didn't get it finished till he came out to visit Cody. And this was loaned to us, and we were given permission to use it in our book from the Navy Department. This is a photograph of the signing of the Japanese surrender aboard the USS Missouri, And you've got Admiral Nimitz signing the document, and General MacArthur is on the left side of the photograph, another Marine general and another Navy admiral, plus all the other dignitaries aboard the Missouri. But that's his note to my dad and my mother. This is Senator E.V. Robertson, who was our U.S. Senator, one of 6 congressmen that have come from Cody, Wyoming, and served in our Congress. And he and Dad were close friends, and he also was a rancher here in Cody. We're at Cheyenne Frontier Days here, and this is Admiral Byrd, and he's signing the hat of Miss Frontier, and they all got to sign it for her. And I wonder today where that treasure is. But Admiral Tomlinson and, of course, Fleet Admiral Nimitz and Senator Robertson on the local radio station. They were the VIPs at the rodeo that day, and what a treat it was for everybody in Cheyenne. Here, leaning over their shoulders, are the president and vice president of Cheyenne Frontier Days, were volunteers that came up, introduced themselves, and they were pleased to have these VIPs, but also invited Admiral Nimitz and Senator Robertson over above the bucking chutes. And here he's over chute 3 and looking out over the arena, but he was watching them saddle the bucking horses or the bulls. And later in the day, they had named different bucking bulls after the different Navy admirals. And I think there was only one cowboy that was able to ride one of these bucking bulls that had the admiral's name on it. But it was quite a day and enjoyed by everybody. Then they next morning flew on to the Tetons and to over Jackson and up to West Yellowstone on the west side of Yellowstone Park. Were picked up in a yellow touring bus and brought down to Old Faithful. And they not only watched Old Faithful once, but several times late in the afternoon and evening before dark, had a nice dinner in the Old Faithful Inn. The Old Faithful Inn is one of the largest structures in the world and still standing today. It was built in 1903 and is still one of the most popular places in Yellowstone Park to visit. I like to stay there. It's quite a treat. But this is Old Faithful erupting with our VIP guests watching and getting to see a eruption of Old Faithful that went up at least 170 feet. When they came back in, they were surrounded by some of the guests at the hotel, and chairs were brought out, and they were signing signatures and visiting with the guests. Now, this is in 1946. And I was looking at these chairs yesterday and this particular photograph. And when I was a park ranger in Yellowstone in the 50s, lo and behold, they had thrown those chairs in a big pile and were getting rid of them. And I have 3, maybe 4 of those that I use in the summertime here with a memory of these gentlemen sitting in them and being a part of our country and Yellowstone, which I call my backyard. But it's a special place to us all and to our visitors. The next morning, they were up early and traveled along the west side of Yellowstone and turned at Norris Junction and came over to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone River. And this is the Upper Falls. And this is Commander Gene Fluckey, who was one of the most decorated men of World War II with the Congressional Medal of Honor and 4 Navy Crosses. He guided his submarine into Tokyo Harbor and torpedoed ships there, not once, but several times. Admiral Nimitz on the left, this is the lower falls of the Yellowstone, and Senator Robertson, and we're looking at the falls from Artist Point. And there's several points both on the south side of the canyon and the north side. There are walking trails and places to stop and photograph. But what a treat for these men that fought for our country and then could come and have the peace and tranquility and the beauty of Yellowstone Park to realize part of what they were fighting for in our way of life. Then they went around through the Hayden Valley, looked at wildlife, and they got to Lake Hotel. Lake Hotel was still closed because of the war. And they got on a couple of boats and went out to Stevenson Island, and they fished and caught cutthroat trout, which ended up being their lunch that day. And people from YP Company came out and had a big barbecue with trout, salad, and it was quite a day for these men to relax and not have to think about what they had been doing for all the years during the war. That's Admiral Nimitz with one of his about a 2.5, 3 pound native cutthroat trout. Here's a photograph. Gene Flucky is cleaning the trout, looking at them. Admiral Nimitz on the left and Senator Robertson. And if you look over the top, near the top center, you can see Yellowstone Lake Hotel, which is the oldest hotel in Yellowstone. And it's the most romantic. My granddad asked my grandmother to marry him there when she was on a tour in 1908 with my granddad. And I met my wife around Lake Hotel, and she was feeding the bears, and I gave her a choice of getting a ticket and going to Mammoth or having dinner with me that night. Well, she says, I'm not stupid. And sure enough, we had dinner and things led to our marriage. And we had 2 boys that were conceived there at Lake, where I was a horse ranger in Yellowstone. While they were waiting for lunch, here's Admiral Nimitz, his pilot, and Gene Flucky swimming in the cold waters of Yellowstone on the lee side of Stevenson Island. And the water someplace between 40 and 50 degrees, but they enjoyed swimming in Yellowstone Lake. This is a photograph of my dad that did most of this photography, Jack Richard, and Admiral Nimitz, and Admiral Nimitz pilot. And they had a great time, and behind them is looking at the east side of Yellowstone and Yellowstone Lake and the road they're going to take to Cody, Wyoming. What a treat they had that day of fishing, eating trout, and seeing a lot of the highlights of Yellowstone Park, which is one of the largest national parks today. And my true love. I can't get up there enough, even today, in my visits. And several of them, including Admiral Nimitz, came back to visit in Cody and visit Yellowstone. Admiral Byrd on the left, Senator Robertson in the center, and Fleet Admiral Nimitz on the right, standing on the bow of one of the boats they had been fishing on. Nice clouds for good photography, and men really enjoying their day in Yellowstone. This is a photograph of my cousin Jody and myself on our horse Princey, and we had just left the house to go down and meet the bus at the highway, which was a mile away, and they stopped on their way out of the park coming to Cody. And they got out of the bus, stretched, and visited with Jody and I and asked about our ranch and had lots of questions about our way of life and what we were doing there. And what a big treat. We knew 2 weeks ahead that they were coming. And we just counted the days down till we could ride down there on this gentle horse, bareback, and share some time with them before they went on to Cody. They arrived on the west side of Cody, and lo and behold, the Boot and Bottle Club and the American Legion had saddle horses for them all to ride into Cody for an impromptu parade down Main Street of Cody, Wyoming. And Admiral Nimitz, being from Texas, was very comfortable on a horse, but some of his staff, one of them made the comment, "I'd rather be in an aircraft flying fast with throttles and ejection seat, but this I'm learning to do." And it was quite a treat for them too. I'm not sure they liked it, but they were real heroes in my mind, and they got on the horses and rode into town. Here they are about ready to start their parade, and they all managed to stay on the horses and really present themselves as the heroes they were then as they are today. This is Admiral Nimitz that he drove out and spent several hours at a powwow, and I believe these are Crow Indians, during one of their ceremonial times, and he was their guest of honor at this and was welcomed, and he was a part of their powwow. And what a treat that was, not only for them, but for Admiral Nimitz. That night, they had a dinner at the Burlington Cody Inn, and all the dignitaries from Cody and our governor and others were having dinner here at the Cody Burlington Inn. And it was a great meal, but it was designed for Millward Simpson, who later became our governor and U.S. Senator. And he was to present the painting done by Edrigware that you saw at the start of the show. And this is where he was presented with his painting that we've looked at. But apparently that was one of the best dinners and best times shared with people from Cody as well as with our naval staff. This is Ed Grigware. He is the artist that came out to Cody in the 30s, taught art to people, and was one of the finest artists to come from Cody. And he served on Admiral Nimitz's staff in Hawaii, and his paintings are in the Naval Museum in Pensacola and elsewhere, and the archives of the Navy, showing and depicting the aircraft and the people during World War II. And he's the one that did the painting of Admiral Nimitz that we used on the cover of our book. The next day, or actually that night, they went out and, on the side of Carter Mountain and spent the night. And this is the next morning. And they are sharing the experience of living and spending the night on the side of a mountain with Irma Lake in front of them, good trout fishing, and the beauty of looking down in the valley. And what a treat it was for these men to relax and share the beauty and the tranquility of our way of life. I call it the Western way of life. This is Senator Robertson looking out with Irma Lake down in front of his feet and looking out over the South Fork and the mountains on the South Fork. And they all commented how wonderful it was to have this type of beauty. And be able to share all of this with others. And it was quite a treat for everyone. The next day, they went out to Senator Robertson's home, the Hoodoo Ranch. And you've got Senator Robertson's wife, Mabel, and their niece, Twyla. And Twyla's parents were running the ranch for Evie, but they had a day at the ranch and spending time seeing what a cattle ranch, how it operated, and another sharing of ways of life and what we have preserved, and thankfully because of what they did for us during World War II. This is Admiral Nimitz holding Twyla, and he was like a grandfather to this youngster and enjoyed giving her lots of hugs, and that's taken at the front door of the Hoodoo Ranch, which exists today. This is in front of the house, or the ranch house, my dad, my mother, Rhea, and Commander Flucky, and relaxing and just thoroughly enjoying the summertime in Wyoming. Here, Senator Robertson and Admiral Nimitz sharing stories, and I wish I could have been there to listen to them. But that rock that they're sitting on is by the front door of the Hoodoo Ranch and is still there today. And what a treat it is to go out to the Hoodoo and see these places are still in existence and maintained. This hangs upstairs, and it's a photograph of a page that all the people that were involved, both in Cody and Admiral Nimitz and his staff, signed. That's just a memory of their being a part of it, and the Cody people at the bottom that were their tour guides, which included our mayor, Paul Stock. Sheriff Blackburn had been sheriff for 33 years. The publisher of the newspaper, Ernie Shaw, of course, Ed Grigware. He was very prominent in the local American Legion and others, but I included that. This is Jeremy Johnson, and he is the historian for the Buffalo Bill Center of the West, which is 9 museums in one. Anyway, it's like the Smithsonian of the West, and he's holding a rifle that had been given to Admiral Nimitz, and then somebody donated it to the museum in the 50s. And standing next to him is Sam Hanna, the assistant curator, and they keep these weapons oiled and cleaned and on display. Here's where Admiral Nimitz signed the forearm of the Winchester rifle, and it sits at the museum. This is the back page of my book, and he sent this in a note thanking everybody in Cody, as well as Senator Robertson. And I'm going to read it to you. In Cody, you have a town which America can truly be proud of. The warm friendliness of the people of Cody is something we shall never forget. Rarely have I seen it equaled, never outdone. And those were his comments. And then he came back in the early 50s, a couple of times during the 50s with his family, and stayed with friends, met with my dad and other friends here in Cody, stayed with them, and he became part of our Cody and our way of life, as well as some of his other staff. And this brings me to the point I think that we want to see if there's some questions, and I'd be happy to respond to them.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bob, for that great presentation. We do have some questions coming in, but if you have a question, please go ahead and add it into that Q&A box, and we'll get to it. So the first question is, out of all the pictures that you've shown us, or maybe we haven't seen, which one is your favorite?
I think my most favorite photograph is my dad with Admiral Nimitz. The other one would be the painting that Ed Grigware had done, because Ed was a friend of mine as well as my dad's, and was friends with Admiral Nimitz.
Okay. Did Nimitz ever return to Wyoming?
Yes, he returned several times and stayed with families here in Cody because he became friends and he felt very at home here. Yes.
What new discovery in your research intrigued you the most?
The archives of Ed Grigware's paintings and the history of each of the men that served on Admiral Nimitz's staff. We had to research those and get the information, which we put in the book.
We're just looking at all the questions right now. This one is from Savannah. Who caught the biggest fish?
Well, I'm sure Fleet Admiral Nimitz caught the biggest fish.
Okay. Question from Mark. How extensive is your collection of photos from this visit?
All of Dad's photos and mine are a part of the Buffalo Bill Center of the West in their archives. And there's over 260,000 negatives of my father's, and specifically of these 35 mil slides that I have made available to the museum. We had over 60 negatives, and it was hard to pick and choose to put in this book.
This is from Karen. Did Admiral Nimitz visit the mural of Edrigware?
It hadn't been painted. He painted that in 1945 in Hawaii, brought it back to Cody when he got out of the Navy and finished it. And then he gave it to Admiral Nimitz in 1946 at the dinner at the Burlington Cody Inn.
What brought about the invitation to Admiral Nimitz coming to Wyoming and visiting Cody?
That was a close working relationship with the Navy and Admiral Nimitz with Senator Robertson and my dad right after the war, and trying to get a balance back into our way of life. My memory was Yellowstone Park. The Lake Hotel was closed for several years because of the war, but they're coming out here and being a part of the visit to Yellowstone helped to get things opened up again and let people know Yellowstone Park is one of our best kept secrets in America.
Right. This is from Dave. It is interesting to see all the officers fully dressed in their service dress khakis. Do you know if they were able to change to Levi's or Wranglers at all?
There's several photographs that they had. They didn't have Wranglers in those days. They were Levi's, and they had to roll up their pant legs because they didn't have them measured for the proper length. But yes, they did have a lot of that, but Dad didn't really want to photograph them except when they were in uniform.
What impressed you the most about Admiral Nimitz when you got to visit with him?
Well, he took time to visit and talk to me and ask me questions, not only about the ranch, but about my family. And at 9 years old, I was very proud that my dad had been in Marine Naval Intelligence, and my uncle, his brother, was a naval aviator and a Marine officer flying in the Pacific. And I was very proud that he took an interest in my family, and they both served under him when he was Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific.
This is from John. How much remembrance of World War II did Nimitz share on this trip?
I was only there for an hour, and he really talked to us about the ranch. I think he responded to questions, but this was a trip down memory lane of seeing a different way of life, not having to make life and death decisions for many people, but understanding what he helped fight for and save for America and the US way of life. And I think they relaxed and they really didn't spend a lot of time talking about the war.
Okay. What do you think Nimitz would think of Wyoming today?
I would say that he would love to be back here because I would take him on a tour and tell him all the stories that I learned from my grandfather, who did tours back in early 1900s, plus what I've learned. I had a tour business for 40 years, and I love sharing all the stories that I learned from people, including Admiral Nimitz, but just telling about our beauty, sharing it, showing the wildlife. This is a very special place, and I cherish that I still live here, but also that I can share it. I'd love to take him on the tour today.
Okay, this question is from Dave. He's asking if those are gold submariner dolphins or aviator wings that are on your vest.
Let's see, I've got the wrong side. Here they are. That is a set of Navy aviator wings that I earned as a young man. And a little story behind it. And I think we have time. If not, cut me off. But my uncle Bob, who was a naval aviator and a Marine, came home on leave after Guadalcanal. And he spent 2 weeks here. And as he got ready to leave, he took his gold wings off his shirt and pinned them on me at the age of 9. And he says, Bobby, someday maybe you can earn these wings and be a naval aviator. And probably 20, 25 years later, those same wings were pinned on me by the Admiral in Pensacola. And he said, I only knew one other Richard, and he was my roommate when I went through flight training. So it was quite a connection with an Admiral all those years later that pinned those wings on me. Yes, I'm very proud of them.
Wow, that's quite a story. So we had another question. Someone's going to be visiting Cody, and they're wondering what is there to do, or what do you recommend to do?
Well, I hope you have a couple hours because this is the best place in the world, and we're the neighbor of Yellowstone Park. Our Chamber of Commerce should be contacted to learn about hotels, places to stay. They have maps. We want people to come share the beauty of the mountains. When I did tours, and they're still operated under my name or under, it's called Yellowstone Tours, but tours of the beauty of the mountains, the wildlife. I've had people come to me and ask, I want to see wild horses and mountain sheep. And I said, that's a tall order. But I took them down to the Bighorn Canyon recreation area and I showed them horses and bighorn sheep in 3 hours and was back to Cody so they could go to the nightly rodeo that goes on every night in Cody during June, July, and August. We have the greatest museum in Western United States. I referred to it earlier as the Smithsonian of the West. It takes 2 days just to walk through it. 9 acres of enclosed memorabilia on the Native Americans, natural history, Buffalo Bill, his history, an Western art museum, a Winchester Arms and Gun Museum. I could go on and on, but what a treat to plan to spend several days in Cody. And as long as I'm around, I'm happy to answer questions for people that call me.
Hi. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have. Thank you again. Thank you again, Bob, for such an amazing story of Fleet Admiral Nimitz and sharing those photos with our audience. We really appreciate your time.
Jacqueline, thank you.
And thank you, audience, again for joining us today. Please check our website for our upcoming webinars and events. We want to thank everyone for your ongoing support of the museum and our programs. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your Friday.